This one. Okay. So now, what are the different types of the repositories we have? We discussed the two types of repositories in the last class, except Srikar. Except Srikar, Rohit, Ravender.
Master repository and work repository.
Master repository and a work repository. Okay. So now, what are the different components of a ODI? What are the different components of ODI?
Designer, operator, and topology and security.
Those four are parts of ODI Studio, right?
Yeah.
What are the main components of a ODI?
Is design time components and runtime components.
Yes. What is the runtime component we have? What is the name of a runtime component we have? What is the runtime component we have?
ELT jobs.
No, I'm asking the name of a runtime component.
The ODI agent of the studio.
Agent is the main component. Agent initiates the ELT job, ODI job. Okay. Now, what are the four different navigators in ODI Studio? Designer, operator, and security manager. Okay. Yeah. So the designer and operator, topology, and security. These four are the four different components in ODI. Okay. So now all these four components, okay, either runtime component or design time component. Okay, those all are interconnected through a component. What is the name of the component where all the components interconnected? So one is very important, which connects all other components. Repository. Okay, so the repository is the main all ODI components includes design time component and runtime component connected to each other through a repository. Okay, what is the basic use of repository? What information it stores in the repository? What information it stores in the repository?
Sometimes only components.
What information it stores in the repository?
Loading of after loading, it will show the information like transformation.
So it's a execution logs, right? What else it stores in the repository? In the last class we discussed what are the main things it stores in the repository. Devendra, Praneeth, Rohit.
Mapping ODI procedures, sources, and tables targets.
So what is the name given to all these includes? So does the ODI repository stores the data? Does the ODI repository stores data? Yes or no?
Yes.
No, does not store the data. It stores the logic for moving the data from source to target. Okay, ODI does not store the data. It stores the metadata. Metadata means how we are going to extract the data from source and what are the transformations we need to apply, and then finally how we are going to load the data. Okay, so the ODI does not store any data. It stores only the basic metadata information. Okay, so it stores the infrastructure of your project. In the last class we have discussed. Okay, see here. So information about infrastructure. So what are the infrastructure means? So what are the sources and what are the targets? What are the sources and the targets? So what are the source means? Okay. What are the source and targets means like a, so the source server name, source and target server name, and the schemas from which we're actually getting the tables. Extracting data and loading data. So that means, see, this is the source server, source and target server name. Okay, one server can have any number of databases. So So the schemas and database and the schema names, the schemas from which we are extracting the data. Okay, and this is the one information, and the information about the agent. Okay, so the what is the other information? It's information about ODI user roles and the responsibilities. ODI user, because we all 6 working in a ODI project. What is your username to log into the ODI repository? What is the password? What is the username? And what are the operations you can do on the database? For example, I want Srikar or only production support. That means I want to give only operator access. Operator. Okay, and I want the Praneeth is only for the development. So then I'll do only designer access. And topology managers only admin related. Topology manager and security manager, Devendra. So I can decide, I can divide what are the roles and responsibilities to each user. So that information we can store in the repository under. And then the second important component we can store in the repository is the mappings. Mapping means it's the data flow from source to target. So the ODI mapping, the mapping is nothing but the main component which moves the data from source to target. Okay, everybody, and the packages and tables and everything will store in this. See here the schema only, but what is that schema? What are the exact tables we will be using for extracting? What are the tables we will be using for loading the data? So all these information will store in the repository. Okay, so the repositories are of 2 types, the master repository and work repository. See here, so I said this is the repository, right? This repository divides into master repository and work repository. Okay, so in a single installation, mostly repository consists one or more master repositories in any installation. Okay, one or more master repository. So it can have one or more master repository. So each installation can have one or more master repository, and one master repository can have multiple work repositories. So one master repository can have multiple work repositories. So one to many relationship. The relation, so the master repository can have multiple work repositories. Okay, so one master repository and work repository. Okay, so let's see what master repository stores and what work repository stores. Mainly master repository. Master repository contains. So what is the information we are storing in the master repository? See the security information. Security. See here, what are these? The security manager. Like a users, roles and responsibilities, roles and profiles, and their privileges. Okay, so what is the information it stores in this master repository? That means the security manager. Okay, so whatever we can do with the security manager, so it has a 4 components, right? So the designer, operator, topology manager and the security manager. So what is the use of security manager? The security manager is for defining the users, ODI users and their password along with the privileges. ODI security manager is mainly for, okay, so users, roles, profiles and their privileges. That means whatever we do with the security manager, it goes to topology master repository. Why? We are going to see. Okay, so now the topology manager. So if anybody asks you what is the use of security manager, so what is the use of security manager? The security manager is for creating the users, creating the profiles, okay, and then we can control the privileges associated to the user. One topology manager. So what is the topology manager means? So it defines the infrastructure of your ODI. Infrastructure of your project. Infrastructure of your project means source and targets. Source server, target server, the servers, one or multiple servers, because we will extract the data from multiple sources. Each source needs to be defined. So the source server and their the schemas. Schema means from where the table. Schemas from where. So we are extracting data. Servers and their schemas. Okay, and the target servers and their schemas, to where we are loading data. So this is the source, from there we are extracting and loading into this target. So we will register what are the sources of your project, what are the targets of your project, will register. And topology manager, we can define the agents also, agents information. So the agent is the runtime component. Mainly used for starting all your ODI jobs. It's for starting the ODI job. So whenever you are creating a ODI job which starts ODI job, agent, the runtime component, mainly used for starting all your ODI jobs. So the topology information. Okay, everybody is clear? Everybody is clear, please? So what information it stores in the master repository? So the master repository stores in the basic information. Okay.
Yeah.
So that means whatever we do with these two, whatever we do with the topology manager, whatever we do with the security manager, those two tools information will stores in your master repository. Okay. Okay, we have one more component which stores in the master repository also. Okay, so now the topology manager information. So what does a work repository contains? Okay, so the work repository is specific to a development. Work repository mainly stores development work. So the development work means all your ODI projects. Like as for example, all project related information. Project related development information. Okay, so what is the project contains and everything. Okay, so we can have work repository is always associated to, we will link work repositories to master repository. Okay, so work repository, I told you, right? Master repository contains multiple work repositories. So that means there is a relationship. Okay, master repository associates to master repository. So we will associate work repository to master repository. So the work repository mainly stores the development work. Okay, so one master repository, we can have multiple work repositories. Everybody is clear? Okay, so multiple work repositories can be created under a single created under single master repository. Why? What is the use of like this? Anybody guess it? Why we have to create a multiple work repositories can be created under the single master repository? Anybody have any idea? Any guess? Okay, what are the different?
Because multiple people can work in work repository, like you have 2 or 3 more projects on work repository, so I can work and some other people can work.
Even in a single master work repository also we can have a multiple projects. Each project is separated. We don't need multiple work repositories there. Okay, so in a single work repository we can have a multiple projects, and each project can be developed by each one Devender and second Rohit and third Shiva and everything. But what is the use of this one? Okay, so let's see. So how many stages are there in your ODI project? Any software development, what are the different stages are there? So development stage, and then testing, and then development, testing, and the production, right? Production, these are the main environment. The development environment, testing environment, and the production environment. So one development environment is for one work repository. Okay, testing is one work repository, and then production is one work repository. All three under a single master repository. That is the use. See here, under a one master repository, one work repository for development, one work repository for test, and one work repository for production. All three can share a single master repository. That means the users, okay, see here, the users and the topology information can be shared across the multiple work repositories. Okay, so multiple work repository can under the single master repository. What information we are storing in a master repository? We are storing and security information and topology manager. The security information means the user. See, I can work in development, I can work in test environment, I can work in production. Okay, so the topology information, the same server I can use for the development, and same server I can use for the testing, and same server I can use for the production. So the same information I can use it for the multiple purposes. So the master repository is very important because the information stored in the master repository can be shared across the multiple work repositories. Mostly work repository stores the development information. Everybody is clear? Yes or no, please? Devinder, Praneet, Rohit, Shiva, Shrikant, any issues?
Yes.
Answer yes or no?
Yes,
Clear? So this is the advantage of having the multiple work repositories. Okay. So now what are the types of work repositories? So work repositories are two types. Types of work repositories, two types. So one is development work repository, and it's execution work repository. So the development work repository is for developing ODI projects. Okay, here is only for production. So the execution work repository is for the execution purpose only. That means we cannot develop in execution work repository. We cannot develop in the execution work repository. Its execution repository is only for monitoring and execution purpose only. And only for execution only, execution only. So in which environment people will use execution work repository? So in the development work environment. So see here, so we have a 3 environments, right? In which environment of the project we will develop the code? So do we develop in the production? Do we write any code in the production?
No,
No, sir.
No. So the
Only
development work in the development environment, we will use development work repository. This is very important. And testing execution work repository. Testing execution work repository. And the production execution work repository. Okay, so the development work repository, in the development work repository, in the execution work repository, and it's a execution work repository. So in the mostly in the development environment, we will use the development, and all the rest of the environments like a execution and production environments, we will use the execution work repository and a production work repository. Everybody is clear? Everybody is clear? What
Yes, sir.
information basically?
Yes.
What information basically stores in your all the developing all ODI projects? Whatever we develop in the ODI projects and execution logs. Execution logs. We are going to see what are the components of the work project, ODI project, and everything we will see in one by one. So the development work repository and everything. So what is the general life cycle of a? This is the basic introduction of your ODI. So I'm not touching agents right now. We will see the agent. So right as of now, just know that what is an agent. Agent is a mainly used for executing your information. Okay. So what are the? Yeah. Somebody saying something? Anybody have any doubts?
No.
No. Okay. So now what are the general life cycle of your ETL project? ETL or data warehousing project. ETL or ELT. Okay. So let's see first thing. What are the general life cycle of a ETL project? We will see what is the ODI component in each phase. The first thing is, okay. So what is the target? What is the target? What is the target? So that means, and what are various sources? Because ETL job is responsible for loading the data from sources to target. Various sources. And the second one, okay, so the mapping document between source and target. So what are the mapping document? The mapping document is what column of the source is loading to what column of a target. So what is the source to target mapping document? And okay, so now for each mapping, what are the business rules we are applying while loading? What are the business rules we are applying while loading the data? Okay, so for each mapping, what are the business rules? So what is the source? Source in the sense is source, target, and then schema tables. Okay, and what are the various sources and tables? Tables, files, etc. XML files and everything. The mapping document. What are the source and what are the targets, and for each mapping, what are the business rules we are applying? Okay, so now fifth one is to, after identifying all the things. Okay, so now, so ETL tool. So register all sources and targets. sources and targets to ODI tool. Not only tool, any ETL tool. Okay, so here in the first step we identified the target. In the second step we identify the sources. So now, so this is the before start of your development. Before start of your development using a tool. So now we need to register all sources and targets to ODI tool. Okay, the second one is to register all sources and targets to ODI tool. Now, so import. Okay, so first create a ODI project. Create ODI project. Okay, so now, so let's see before, yeah, create a ODI project. Now, import all tables from source and targets into ODI. Okay, so into ODI, so importing all the tables. See, we know what are the source tables and what are the target tables. We know what are the source tables and what are the target tables. We need to import those tables from source to targets. Now, so create ODI mappings. So create ODI components. Create ODI components. What are the ODI components we have? ODI component in the sense is mappings. Okay, now ODI procedures, not Oracle procedures, ODI procedures. Any user functions, if any user functions. Okay, and then ODI packages, generate scenarios, and create load plans. Create load plans and use any other variables. Any variables required. Variables required in the project. Required in ODI project. So these are the various components. What is the life cycle I'm taking? So what are we going to develop with ODI? We are going to develop a mappings. We are going to develop a procedures. We are going to develop some user functions. We are going to develop a ODI packages. So generate scenarios, create a load plans and use any variables. Now, okay, after finishing your development, so generate, okay, export all scenarios and load plans from development environment to testing to production. We'll develop. Okay, so we will, after finishing development, export all scenarios. Okay, so now before, so here testing all the components, all developed components. We need to test it using operator. Using operator or ODI console. In the last class we told it's another component, ODI console. We will develop and we will test it. Once the testing is done, so testing in the sense is development testing, developer testing and all the developed components. And then once it is finished, after finishing the development, export all the scenarios, load plans from development environment to testing and production. So and then monitoring, production support and monitoring. So we will schedule jobs, and once everything is done, we will schedule. Schedule in the sense the jobs will run automatically, daily morning 5 o'clock or daily night 12 o'clock, and schedule all ODI jobs under production support and monitor. Monitoring. So these are the basic steps. What is the target and tables? What are the various sources and tables? And mapping document between the source and the target for each mapping, and what are the business rules we are applying while loading, and register all source and target to ODI tool and ETL tool. Okay, so here, so create a ODI project. We'll create a ODI project and import all the tables from source to target. And what are the tables, what are the target tables, and everything we will develop. And create ODI components. What are the creating ODI components? The mappings, whatever we're going to develop, mapping, procedures, any user functions, and then ODI packages, and then generate scenarios, and then create load plans, and everything we will use all the development. Okay, everybody, anybody have any doubts, please? Everybody, anybody have any doubts? Devendra, Praneeth, Rohit, clear? Okay.
Yes.
So before doing all these steps, see, these are not tool specific. Okay, so up to here are not. Up to here, these are not tool specific. Above steps are not ETL or ELT tool specific. These are the generic. Okay, so these are the generic for all your any ETL project. These are the generic. So now here register. Okay, so registering all source and targets to ODI tool. What is the component you will use for registering the source and the targets? So what tool of ODI will be used to registering source and the target? What tool you will be using for registering all your sources and target? Devendra, what tool, what component of ODI you will use for registering source and targets, and where this information stores?
It's repository.
Stores in the repository, but what type of repository it is? What tool you will use?
Central
Master.
Internet?
Central
Master
repository.
repository.
It's not a central repository, right? We have only master and work repository. Okay. So registering source and targets. What is the tool you will be used for registering the source and target? See, we have 4 components, right?
Yeah.
Topology.
Yes, topology manager. So the infrastructure for this one, topology manager. So the topology manager stores in master repository. This information stores in master repository. So now the creating a project. So in which component you will use for creating a project? What is the component you will be used for creating a project?
Designer.
Is it a designer
Master
or is it a master repository?
Agents.
So where we develop? Designer. Okay, SI designer. So in which repository designer information stores? Is it a master repository or it is a work repository? If it is work repository, what type of work repository? So the designer information stores in what repository? Work repository.
Master.
Work repository.
As agents.
Right, designer information stores in the work repository of development type. So it's a development work repository. So the designer information. So all these below steps. Step designer, import all tables, designer, creating ODI components like mappings, procedures, any user function, all these can be developed in the designer. Okay, so the load plans can be created in both designer and operator also. Designer and operator. Operator information is also stored in work repository, or it is in a master repository. Where does that operator information stores?
Work.
Operator information is also stored in work repository. See, that is the only information what stores in the master repository is topology information and security manager. So the rest of all the information stored in the work repository. If anything, whatever we are developing, which stores in the development work repository. So the rest of the information, so we'll store in this operator. So developer testing all the developed component using the operator and ODI console. We can test it and we can monitor the jobs using this operator. After finishing the development, export all the scenarios and the load plan from development to environment, development environment to test, and test to production. How you will use moving the code, export import process. Using export import process, we will be deploying. Deploying means moving the code from development to test and test to production. ODI code from development to test and test to prod. So we will be deploying ODI code from dev to test and test to production. So what is the process we will be using? So using that process is called as the export import process. Okay, now scheduling of all ODI jobs and monitoring. So scheduling can be done with the operator, and the monitoring can be done with the operator as well as ODI console. Anything can be used. Operator as well as ODI console is for your development. So these are the steps we are going to use. We will see one by one step. So these are not common to, these are not tool specific. These are the anybody can use any technology. It can be a ODI, or it can be a Oracle, or it can be a Informatica, or anything, or open source ETL tool. For anything, these 4 steps are common, because we are not using any tool for these 4 steps. And once the starting from 5th here. Okay, so importing all the tables. So the tomorrow we are going to start each step theory as well as the practicals. Okay, so before doing all these steps, what we need is ODI installation needs to be done. Installation and repository creation. Repository creation for both work and master repository. For both master and work repository. Okay, so now once the ODI installation is done and once the repository is done, okay, so now we need to connect to the repository. So once the repository connection is there, so then we can start the development. Okay.
Repository.
Internet? Anybody?
How we need to create repository?
How do you create repository, right?
Yeah.
Yes, that we will see in after few classes. Okay, that comes under the administrator point, ODI administrator responsibility. Okay, that we will see once you have. So because you people are going to start marketing in next week, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the repository creation is not that much important for the interview point of view. You need to know at least these steps for this one. Okay, if anybody asks you what are the repository, what are the types of repository, what are the main components you will develop, okay, mappings, procedures, what is map, what is procedure, what is the package, what is the difference between scenario and load plan, that we will see basic steps for each one. Then we will start more detail, and then we will see the repository creation. Okay, repository creation we will do with the RCU. There is a component called repository creation utility. RCU stands for repository creation utility or ODI studio. These are the tools we will use for creating a repository. Existing environment, whatever virtual machine you have everything is set up. So the only thing is we will use it. Okay, everybody, definitely I'll take the couple of classes for repository creation and ODI installation, because that's very important if you are want to learn more things from ODI. Okay, everybody is clear? Tomorrow we are going to start our development, mapping development, and first we will start with the registering the sources and targets to ETL tool, then create a project. Okay, so what are the main components of a project? We'll see one by one. Okay, everybody? Yes or no, please? Devendra, any doubts? Praneeth,
Yes, sir.
Rohit, Sachin? Sachin, you are not coming to class regularly. Sachin,
Yeah,
time ground miru, okay?
yeah, okay.
Important amma, time miss avadu.
Yeah, some network problem.
Yeah, okay. Videos వినండి అట్లీస్ట్, కానీ టైం వస్తే బెటర్. వీడియోస్ విన్న దానికంటే క్లాస్ వినటం బెటర్. ఓకే,
Yeah,
ఓకే అండి, టుమారో at 10 o'clock. ఓకే, బై.
okay.